Well, everyone, hello and welcome back after a little bit of a mini break that we both desperately needed. This is Pucks and Brews. I am your host, Michael Sparacino, alongside, as always, the chill master, Liam Godimer. Liam, how was your break from the podcast?
It's been good. I mean, not that I, of course, wanted to be away from the podcast, but of course, no, it's good to be back with you, Shades. And it's Michael Shades Sparacino, by the way. And of course, Liam Chowmaster got you can't forget your own nickname, man. I mean,
I
come on now.
I
But
cannot.
of course, it's great to be back on Pucks and Brews. No cold brew for you, no drink for me. It's a little bit of a different episode today, but it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I just I went for a run earlier, not good. So this is just
Yeah,
not
you texted me that it wasn't good. What let's talk about it. What happened?
just left leg was killing
Not,
me the whole time.
yeah,
Yeah,
tough.
and just, soreness because I still got to work my way up. So
You're running a 5K, right?
I'm running in the New York City Marathon
Oh, okay. Wow. There you go.
in
For all who
November.
didn't
So
know,
yeah,
Shades is
yeah,
running New York City Marathon. That's
yeah.
awesome.
So I'm doing this podcast on top of working two jobs, on top of training for that. So things are getting a little busy, and they're only going to get even more hectic. So yeah,
Yes,
it's
sir.
going to be a very interesting couple of months. But the reason we're here today, by the way, everyone, welcome to episode 40, the big 40 of Pucks and Brews. And yeah, here we go. So basically, the playoffs are right around the corner. We have still only one matchup set with two other seeds being set, if I remember correctly, one of them being the Rangers, the third seed in the Metro. And just to go off the top of my head, Boston obviously is the number one seed in the East. So those two seeds are outside of Toronto, Tampa. Those are the two set seeds so far. And if I remember correctly, Minnesota is also set at third in the Central. So they will be playing either Colorado or Dallas to be determined. And Winnipeg is the second wild card confirmed. So outside of Toronto, Tampa, and a couple other seeds, we still don't know any other matchup. And I kind of like this, not going to lie.
Yeah, a lot of things are up in the air, Shades, and with only a couple games to go, and for some teams, only one game left to go in the regular season. I think it's really an exciting time for sure. And like you said, the only confirmed series, well, pretty much, well, not the Rangers and the Devils. I was going to say the Rangers and the Devils, but the winner of the Metropolitan Division will be determined tonight, of course. So we'll see. But yeah, no, a lot of series yet to be determined. Unfortunately, Buffalo fell short yesterday in their loss to the Devils. They got themselves eliminated, but a great season for the Sabres. Just want to give them a quick shout out. But again, I'm excited. And Toronto, Tampa, as it was last year, I'm expecting it to be a great one.
Yeah, I was low key pulling for Buffalo because I'm just like, I
So was I.
understand.
So was I.
I understand the pain of a 12-year playoff drought, and so do you because we're New York Jets fans. So,
Yes, it's brutal.
and
It's
they're
brutal.
also a New York team that I don't despise. So that was going in their favor too.
Well, you know what? We were rooting for the two Atlantic teams, right, in the wild card race, as opposed to the two Metropolitan teams. But unfortunately, it looks like one of the two Metropolitan teams are going to make it. Find that out tonight too. So
Well, at least we got one uh Atlantic team. Jeez, my brain's already not working today. But hey, at least we got one. So one less Metro team in the playoffs. That's good, right?
yeah, no, that is good for sure. And we'll see if my yearly prediction of the Penguins not making the
Oh yeah.
playoffs
Now
comes
this
down to
is
this.
I would absolutely love to see the Islanders lose tonight just so all the pressure is on the Penguins tomorrow night. We're recording on Wednesday, April 12th, by the way. This episode will be out Thursday, April 13th, and we're recording at 5. It's currently 5:25 p.m., so these games have not happened yet. If the Islanders lose against Montreal tonight and all the pressure is put on the Penguins tomorrow night against the
Columbus
against
Blue Jackets.
against the Blue Jackets and the Penguins lose, I legitimately might have to go to the hospital from laughing so hard.
I mean, two shoe-in victories, right, against the Chicago Blackhawks and the Columbus Blue Jackets. You walk away with no wins. I mean, here's the thing, Shades. For me, whether it's the Islanders or the Penguins who missed the playoffs, it's a win-win, baby. It's a win-win. Let the cards play out as they may. Because
Yeah, And we will
Your team's
see.
going to get destroyed by Boston, so that's that. So,
Oh, yeah. And we will see if your prediction finally comes true of the Penguins missing the playoffs.
well, Shades, if it takes another year, I'll be right back at it next year in our preseason predictions,
And I'll be
talking the
right
same.
here with you, agreeing with you this time.
That's what's up. There you go.
All right. So speaking of the playoff race, there are a couple teams that barely missed the playoffs that, well, let's be honest, they blew it. And at the same time, we have some teams that are just what the hell happened? And I'm talking about the Calgary Flames. So, Liam, let's start off in the West before we actually, no, let's start off in the East. So, obviously, it's going to come down to the Islanders and the Penguins in for the final wild card spot, even though that's technically one of them the Islanders could still technically get the number one wild card. But Buffalo's out. Ottawa is going to end up missing. And Detroit, who I thought had a wonderful offseason, is also going to end up missing by a decent margin. So you mentioned earlier the Sabres are going to 100%. They had a great season. They fought until almost the very end. They can still end up with 91 points and miss it by a single point. But they're making the playoffs next year, in my opinion. Tage Thompson had a phenomenal season. That team has a lot of young guys, and they're going places.
Absolutely. Well said, Shades. I think the Buffalo Sabres are one of those teams that are on the up and up. I mean, they're just supremely talented in every single area of their lineup. I mean, did you see the way that Devin Levi handled the Rangers in the shootout and how
Uh-huh.
Artemi Panarin came in with a chance to win the game on his stick, and Levi denied him, didn't even bite for that fake? I'll tell you, Joe Micheletti was impressed in that moment in the commentary booth for the Rangers on MSG. I was too. I was like, wow, this is going to be, a terrific starting goaltender for years to come for the Sabres. You look at their back end, Shades, this is the year of Rasmus Dahlin. He's not going to win the Norris or anything, but he's solidified himself as one of the best defensemen in the league. And you got Owen Power. See his shootout goal the other night against the Rangers? Oh, man, that was a beauty as well. So, I mean, this is a young team that has so much talent oozing out of their forward group, their defense core, and their goaltending. And I think they're going to make the playoffs next year. And yeah, has there been a substantial playoff drought for the Buffalo Sabres? Absolutely. But how many years in those playoff droughts could you say that come the final 3 games of the season, those games matter? And for the Buffalo Sabres and their fans, their final few games truly mattered. And you know what? They fell short, but congratulations to them on that, and a tip of the cap to Don Granato and the team that Kevin Adams has put together. And Kyle Oposo, too. Underrated captain. Good leader.
Yeah, even though Okposo played for the Islanders for all those years, I never disliked him as much as other Islanders. So I'll give him
You
props in that regard,
just dislike Islanders because they're Islanders, right?
pretty
Yeah.
much. So we go from the Sabres to the Senators, who also have a very skilled young team, but their back end and a little bit of goaltending ended up being their downfall this season. Could it have been a different story if Josh Norris was healthy all year? Possibly, but that's not how the cards fell for them.
Yeah, the Senators had a pretty bad start to the regular season. And, of course, this was coming off an off season where Shades, you were one of them, right? You predicted Ottawa to make a significant jump in the Atlantic Division. Did you predict them to make one of the wild cards, right? Was it?
Yes.
Or did you have them missing? Okay, right. So one of the wild cards. They're a very talented team. I love Josh Norris. I think he's one of the best young centers in the game. It's a shame that he was injured for as long as he was. I think there were a couple trades that kind of doomed Ottawa. I think one that not a lot of people are talking about is the Philip Gustafson trade, where they moved him to the Minnesota Wild in exchange for Cam Talbot. And, I think Ottawa at the time thought they were getting Cam Talbot, a solidified starting goaltender, somebody who's going to come in and stabilize that position. But they trade away Gustafson. Not a lot of people are talking about him, but he quietly has a goals against average that is among the tops in the NHL. So Gustafson is a very good goaltender. He's very young as well. I think he's only 23 or 24 years old. So as much as Ottawa is building up something good, I think if they would have not made that trade and maybe abstained from moving on from Gustafson in exchange for Talbot and kind of forcing that move in the goaltending position. I think that they would be in a better spot. But again, let me just finish, my point on this. I think like Buffalo, Ottawa is one of those teams that next year come to playoff time, when you have these veteran teams like the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Islanders, the Washington Capitals, all falling out of the race. I think it's going to be Ottawa. It's going to be Buffalo. It's going to be teams like Detroit that eventually transition into the spot that those teams now occupy.
Now, I'm not trying to start a narrative here, but don't be surprised if Tampa is on the verge of missing the playoffs next year, because all those games for all those teams that make significant playoff runs for consecutive years, they do end up catching up, even if it's just for a year or two before they're able to fully regroup and go back at it 100% again.
I don't think that they'll fall out of a wild card spot. I think that they'll make the playoffs. I mean, just again, like you look at the Penguins, right? They for the last couple of years, they haven't necessarily had the depth that they had in their Stanley Cup years in 2016 and 2017. But again, the top line players are going to keep you in the playoff race. And that's one of the things I learned about the Penguins. Even when their goaltending wasn't great, or when their depth wasn't great, or when the defensive deficiencies really showed out, at the end of the day, they still had Jake Gensel. They still had Sidney Crosby. They still had Chris Letang, and they still had Evgeny Malkin. And as long as you have those four players or a core of superstars, you're going to remain in the playoffs, for a long time. And it took until this year for the Penguins to potentially miss the playoffs after consecutive years of making it. So with Tampa Bay, I think it's the same thing. You have Point, you have Stamkos, you have Kucherov, you have Hedman, you have Vasilevsky. I don't think there's any way they fall out. But I could see them take a little bit of a regression, because the Atlantic Division, as the years continue to go by here, and as these young players in this division continue to develop, it's going to get more and more difficult. So it's very
Yeah.
interesting to watch over the next few years for sure.
Yeah, and honestly, this year could be the regression. You never know.
Yeah, again, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. So we'll see how they do in the playoffs. And they've had a history of struggling in the playoffs. And I think a lot of fans around the NHL and a lot of people around the game, they like Toronto in the playoffs. So,
As
but
do
that's a
I,
conversation for a playoff prediction episode. So
which will be in a couple days. And just to confirm, Filip Gustafsson second in the league in both save percentage and goals against average. So very good season. And lastly, in the East, before we move over to the West, we got the Detroit Red Wings. And even though they're potentially going to miss by as much as 13 points, we saw strides. They're still a couple moves away, but they put up a good fight for a little bit.
again, they were in it for a while, and again, a Steve Yzerman built team is always going to be competitive, right? They locked up Dylan Larkin, which is something that they had to do. I think their goaltending position is a little bit of a weak link. I like Ville Husso. I don't like Ville Husso as a starter. Their defense, again, I still think they need a top end D man on the back end. I think that's what they're missing. A lot of good prospects. I like Lidstrom. I like Edvinson. But again, I still think you need a little bit more, maybe delve into the free agent pool a little bit. I don't think Ben Sherratt is necessarily doing them any favors. But again, Steve Yzerman's all that matters. Maybe get a little bit of a better goaltender to go alongside Ville Husso and, add some defense. And again, I think they'll be in that group among Buffalo and Ottawa to make strides next year.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that one. And on to the West. There's really only two teams that we need to talk about here because, well, St. Louis was just a joke this year. Let's start off
Hey,
with,
raise your hand if you predicted St. Louis to win the Central. Hey.
you did? I don't even remember that.
I did. That was an oof. Tough one.
Well, I mean, my oof was Boston missing the playoffs over Ottawa, so I'll take the L there.
Absolutely.
We all have one terrible take.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, the Nashville Predators can potentially only miss the playoffs by 1 point if they win out and Winnipeg loses their final game. The fact that they were in it until the literal last 4 days of the season, after they sold basically everything that wasn't named Roman Josi or Philip Forsberg at the trade deadline. This was fascinating to witness.
Fascinating, impressive, and props to the Nashville Predators. And I hope that it makes Barry Trotz take a second look at this roster. when thinking about the future and what he's going to do with it, and some of their core players like your Johanssons, like your Duchesnes, like your Roman Yossi Saros, So I think this is a team that, with a little bit of tweaking, maybe a little bit of a retool, I think has the young players to complement the veterans that they have. And again, if they can change a little bit, of their group, to help in some areas where they've struggled, I think they'll be fine. And one of the areas that I think Nashville really needs to adjust, and I don't think it's going to happen, unfortunately, and I think Nashville and their fans are really clamoring for it, John Hines has to go. John Hines has to go. And I think that this latest stretch here probably saves his job. But I think that's the move that Nashville has to make, maybe go a little bit younger, a little bit more of a development coach. Because again, New Jersey got rid of John Hines, and yeah, it took some years for their rebuild to really, come full circle. But look what Lindy Ruff is doing with this roster. And that's Lindy Ruff, and he's stuck with the Rangers. So yeah, okay.
Even though he wasn't technically the head coach, yes, I agree with you. And he didn't get the greatest hand dealt to him, but I still agree with you.
But credit to Lindy Ruff for his success with the Devils, of course.
Yeah, and the Devils are a scary team this year, but we'll get back to that in the next episode. On to the Calgary Flames. Let me just say this. If they would have made the playoffs this year, I would have blown a gasket and went on a tirade that was worse than my fantasy hockey one from last year. 17 loser points. 17. And that is the only reason they are above 90 points, let alone 80. That's a whole other rant for another day. But they are going to finish the season with 37 or 38 wins, depending on whether or not they win their last game. I mean, we called it from the get-go. It was going to be damage control from the offseason because they lost Gaudreau, they lost Tkachuk, even though they traded him for an absolute haul in Huberdeau, Weegar, a prospect, and a first-round pick. And I think we all know what the problem is here. It was Daryl Sutter, isn't it?
I was about to say Calgary is another team that needs a coaching change, and Daryl Sutter's got to go. He's just wore out his time with Calgary. And again, I think it's a team that probably wants to get a little bit younger too. I think they realize that they're not a contender at this point. And while they have superstars like Jonathan Huberdeau, and there is no Tkachuk anymore, there is no Gaudreau. I mean, there's still a nice foundation here, and I just don't think. I think Daryl Sutter is built for a team that wants to win a championship right now. And at one point, Calgary was that way. Not anymore. He's got to go.
Yeah, Calgary struck me as a team last year, with hindsight being 2020 now, that they caught mini lightning in a bottle, but it just hasn't worked long term at all.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, so 15 of the 16 seeds are set, and it could potentially be tonight that all 16 teams are set, or it could be tomorrow. We shall see. So, on to our next topic here. I know you wanted to specifically talk about the Edmonton Oilers, and red hot is almost not a good enough term to describe their record in their last 19-20 games. They were 16-2-1. Did they make that 17-2-1?
I believe it is 17-2-1, yes.
Jesus Christ.
They're 7-3-0 in their last no, excuse me. They're 9-0-1 in their last 10, and they've won 8 in a row. And they still trail the Vegas Golden Knights in the Pacific Division. So,
I mean,
that's where they're at. They're 2 points behind with 1 game each left to play. But Edmonton owns the tiebreaker. I mean, they have the best player in the world. I mean, they got Matthias Ekholm, who is an elite defensive defenseman, exactly what the doctor ordered for this Edmonton team. If you would have asked me or you prior to the season starting, what does Edmonton need to get back to the playoffs and to get past round 1? I would have said stable goaltending, number 1 defenseman. And Ekholm is that. And Stuart Skinner's been great.
I would have agreed with you, but I would have been like, they need defense overall, not just the number 1 D-man. But
well, they've gotten it. I feel like, again, they've gotten in-house production for me. They get rid of Tyson Barrie, of course, who was elite on the power play. But, you don't really need offense as much as you need defense. Darnell Nurse, is he overpaid? Yes. But is he having one of his better seasons? Also, yes. I like what Evan Bouchard's done this year. So I think it's a decent defensive core. They've gotten better. But I think this team lives and dies with goaltending. And they've gotten good goaltending. Not in the beginning out of Jack Campbell, but lately out of Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner too.
Yeah, Jack Campbell, one of the guys who screwed me over in fantasy this year. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, guy. Yeah, but if
Sorry,
they
man.
end like the fact that they have a chance to win the Pacific with well, let's be honest, if they weren't on the 17-2-1 stretch, I mean, they would they'd be fighting for a wild card spot right now.
Yep, they would. And they need to win to maintain their position. And, they've created a decent amount of separation between them and Los Angeles.
Yep.
And again, Vegas, look, they're one of those teams that have defied the odds all season, despite not making the big splash that everybody expected at the trade deadline, some injuries, especially to their goaltending, and they have far exceeded expectations. Go back to our preseason predictions. I think I had Vegas third or fourth in the Pacific. So, again, great season by them. Edmonton is knocking right on the door, and it comes down to the last game of the year.
Yeah, I remember I had Vegas back in the playoffs this year, 100%. Because last year I thought was an anomaly because just what's the word? A substantial amount of injuries. I feel like that's not even a strong enough word. But the Oilers, if they keep this up, watch
Well, the
out.
Oilers have the Oilers have the Sharks on Thursday in their last game of the year. Vegas has Seattle. So,
Ooh,
realistic possibility here that the Edmonton Oilers could win the Pacific Division by the time Thursday is over.
I'm just gonna double check that. I'm looking at the amount of regulation wins. Edmonton does have the tiebreaker. This is going to be fascinating. I might actually have to watch both of those games tomorrow night, or at least one of them.
Yep. And then 2 games on Friday, Sabres, Blue Jackets, which is not going to matter, and Avalanche Predators, which might.
That game actually could very well matter for Colorado. But well, we've gone on with McDavid's spicy hot, ultra hot, watch out, Oilers, and now we go to the Rangers. So yeah, a pretty major piece of news happened. I don't know if you heard about it, Liam, but Filip Chytil got extended 4 years, and yeah, that puts a smile on my face.
Yeah, it's huge. Puts a smile on my face too. I actually got the notification, I think from you, right as I was doing a broadcast, and I was like during my open, and I was like, "Oh, let me just check my phone real quick." And the Gladiator. Oh, wow. Okay, Filipino just got extended, and I was like, "Shoot, I got to check out the AAV." And I think it might have slipped my mind. What is it? 4 times 4.8, something like that, or maybe a little bit lower.
Believe it or not, I actually forgot because forgot to make a note of it, but I can always just double
But
check
again,
right now.
it's an extension that they had to make. Again, the kid line's been their best line for many points this season, and you need to keep around as many of those players as you can. Does it make a little bit of an interesting decision to come in the future between Keandre Miller and Alexi Lafreniere? Maybe. But again, that's a decision for another time, and we'll see. But Filipino is back, and the heat's on for the next 4 years.
4.4375.
It's good value.
I
That's
think
good
that's going to be
value.
very good value. See,
If a team, because again, yeah, go for it.
I was going to say, this has the potential to be as much of a steal as the Zibanejad contract, the last one.
Yeah. Yeah. Right when Zibanejad was coming into his own. What was he paid in that last deal?
It was like 5.25, 5.7 something. It was definitely under 6 mil.
Okay.
Actually, I could
Well, for Mika
probably
Zibanejad, I mean, 6 mil is pretty good, And again, for the player that he turned out to be, just an elite two-way player. I mean, that's what you hope Filipino is going to turn into, right? And the fact that you lock him up for 4 years,
5.35.
I mean, that's not, yeah. That
5.35
was a
was
steal at the
Zibanejad's last
time.
contract.
That was a steal at the time that was a steal at the time for Mika, but we didn't really know what he was going to turn into. And you know
Oh yeah.
what? Get the Hedo contract, and I say that's a steal right now for the Rangers. We don't know what Hedo's going to turn into at the end of the day, and that's how I was feeling with Mika. And if Hedo turns out to be 3/4 of the player Mika is, I'll be okay.
Yeah, especially
So
for a late round pick, first round pick in outside of a few players is a pretty weak overall draft.
2017, yeah,
Yep.
6 years ago too. So the Rangers sticking it out with Hedo's development, and Hedo being committed. Good for him. He was sent down to the AHL a bunch of times. he's
Yeah.
stuck with it. He's having his breakout year. So he definitely deserves the contract. So good for him.
Yeah, we definitely knew there was something in Heedle as soon as those first couple of preseason games happened right after he got drafted. Now, did it take a
I
little
mean,
while for him to get to find his footing? Yes, but this just goes to show you not all first round picks are created equal.
absolutely. And the skill was undeniable with Heedle from the beginning. It was just for me, and let me know if you feel the same way. It was just, could he adapt to the NHL game, and could he? I think personally, and early in his career, I didn't think he was the best team player. Not that he wasn't good with his teammates, but just because he just seemed like a do-it-all himself kind of guy. And I feel like playing alongside Kako and Lafreniere has opened that up for him, and he's just excelled. He is the driving force of that line between a number one overall pick and a number two overall pick.
Yeah,
So
yeah, a 6 years ago, a first round pick, and he's basically turned into a high end third line forward. Could he be the second line forward soon? Maybe, probably.
good.
But then that creates a whole other lineup question, which that's going to be a whole side tangent, which we'll get into probably over the summer. But 4 years at 4.4375, I think this is going to turn into a steal.
Steal of a deal. Good for the Rangers, good for Chris Drury, good for Filip Chytil. And again, because again, I think that sometimes contract talks do have an effect on a player's, just how they handle the game and how they approach the game. And I think, going into the playoffs, you don't want that on Chytil's mind. And the fact that they got that done and that he's a Ranger for the foreseeable future, that's huge for the team and player.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I'm very much looking forward to these next 4 years out of him.
Me as well. Because again, we saw the development out of Vika Zibanejad, right? So, we saw it with our real eyes, and now we want to see it out of Heedle, and that's something that we're going to look out for, while at the same time compete for a Stanley Cup during every single one of those 4 years of Heedle's contract, which is a really cool thing to say.
Yeah, like you said, if he turns into 75% of Zibanejad, that is a triple win. Drafting, developing, and actually retaining a good player throughout the whole process, which I just thought of all of that on the spot. So I think my brain's back.
Right. Maybe your brain is back. Didn't even need the cold brew.
Well, I'm gonna probably still do. It's going to be a late night. But so on to some general Rangers talk to end it, as we usually do. Well, the first period mishaps are back. They start slow almost every single game, and this is frustrating, annoying, aggravating, throw whatever word you want in there, but it's still a thing, and we still have to address it because it is brutal, and it is painfully obvious. And this needs to stop. I need your thoughts on this.
And it hasn't cost us in a lot of games, but I look back to some of the most important games of the last couple of weeks. I mean, remember against the Devils a couple of weeks ago when it was in New Jersey, and again we got off to a poor start, and again we kind of fired back late, found our footing a little bit, but again too little, too late. Shades, that cannot happen in the playoffs. Same team in the Devils. Again, we were outplaying New Jersey in the early portions of that game. Vitek Vanacek just stood on his head. And the Devils, they went up 2-0 in that game. So again, that could easily resurface in the playoffs. And that just scares me because that's against our first round matchup, most likely, in the Devils. So again, they need to get that short up. They can't rely on the second and third period to play their best hockey. Look, you need to play 60 minutes. And if you don't play 60 minutes, guess what? The Devils will, or the Hurricanes will. And you know what? Igor Shesterkin can't be godlike every single night to keep you in games. So it's a little bit of a concern. I think that they'll figure it out. But again, there's only one game left for the Rangers. It comes tomorrow night against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I don't really know how many of their superstars are going to be in the lineup. I don't think Panarin's going to play. I doubt Kane is going to play. You don't want to risk injury the game before the postseason begins. But again, I think they might have just needed a little bit of a better primer. And I think that they needed to look a little bit better in these last couple of weeks, for me to feel really comfortable. And these first period woes, got to get over it. And, I know it's one game, but I'm going to have a sharp eye on how the Rangers do in period one against Toronto tomorrow.
Yeah, and well, obviously, I'm going to keep a sharp eye on periods 2 and 3 too. But like you said, there might be a lot of players sitting tomorrow, so tomorrow's game might not even be worth watching if we're being honest.
Right. Yeah. It's probably going to be a 3-line show. No Lindgren, no Truba, Halak.
Oh, I just need to say this about
So
Lindgren real quick. This guy has no luck, man. Like none whatsoever.
yeah,
For
yeah,
like, what was
he's
it, first or second shift into the game? He takes a high stick, or no, he took a shot straight to the face while
mhm.
blocking a shot. And guy's a warrior. He comes back almost like two shifts later. But I mean, dude, this happens like every game. The guy just no luck.
Guy's an absolute warrior, but he takes a beating every single time he goes out on the ice. But again, we need him. We need him at as close to 100% as we can get him. So if it means he's got to sit out, against Toronto, that's all good. And I'm happy that he looks like he's recovering well from his shoulder injury.
Yes, and we definitely do need him at 100% because you and I both painfully witnessed how bad the defense core in general was when he was out.
Yeah, defense core was not too good when he was out.
No.
Especially Jacob Trouba and Keandre Miller having more responsible roles. Miller's not having his best year. Of course, Trouba, we can talk about him for days. Of course, Adam Fox kind of looked a little bit, directionless playing with Nico Mikkola. Not that I exactly blame him, but I think the part of the reason why Adam Fox is as good and as productive as he is from the back end is because of his partner in Ryan Lindgren. When you take that away from him, you got to expect Foxy's play to drop a little bit, and it had. So, again, he's a very important part to this team. I think he's one of the, anchors to this defensive core. And if he's out or not at 100%, that could make the difference to whether the Rangers beat the Devils or they don't.
Yeah, I personally
Or
think
Carol.
that Lindgren is the glue that holds this defense core together. And like I said before, it was painfully obvious that he was. And it's
I
good to
agree.
have him back, and I hope he stays healthy.
Right on.
Yeah, and now you brought this up to me in the pre-show, and I want you to say this on the actual podcast episode. So, your thoughts on Patrick Kane so far since we acquired him? Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to use the word washed, but I'm going to use the word washed. Again, he's 34 years old. He's clearly not skating at 100%. There's something up with his hip. You can just tell. He had to miss a couple of games in the last week or so, for an undisclosed reason. Everybody under the sun that follows the New York Rangers knows that it's his hip. I just again, he's not great in the D zone. I'm not expecting him to be great in the D zone, but he hasn't really, had a positive effect on the power play. A lot of his goals have kind of been his first goal in Montreal was beautiful, but some of one went off the skate, in Buffalo. That was kind of a little bit of a lucky goal, So I'm still waiting to see the Patrick Kane of old. But again, like I said in the beginning before the show started, I think that Patrick Kane has a chance to showcase what he's been holding in. And I think that maybe he's holding back a little bit in the regular season in what are essentially meaningless games. I think that most of people have forecast the Rangers against the Devils for a while now and have known that the Rangers are not going to win the division. Of course, New Jersey has the potential to win the division, but I still think that they're not. Um, you know, again, that's just kind of where I'm at. And yeah,
Yeah, and the kid line overall in general, they're back because they were, let's be honest, they were pretty shit for a good 20 game, 15, 20 game stretch there. And now it looks like they've turned the engine back on and they are going. And they've been our best line in the last couple of weeks, if I'm being honest.
Kid line has figured it out, and the Kid line was our best line in the playoffs last year, and they
Yes.
were a huge reason why we had all the success that we did. So you know what? If it means that the Kid line needs to be the driving force again this year, I'm not opposed to that. And again, I think leading up to the postseason, I think that certain players play or a lines play, I think, definitely is indicative of how well they're going to perform in the playoffs as they do in the stretch run leading up to the postseason. And I think having Lafreniere, Kako, and Heedle at the top of their games. And like I said, no distraction with Heedle in his contract anymore. I think that this line is going to excel as they did last playoffs this year.
Yes. And Tyler Mott also proving yet again how important he is to this fourth line and why Drury never should have let him walk in the first place.
Well, again, I think I said it earlier in the show or before the show. The best lines for the Rangers in the last few weeks have been the third and fourth lines. No question about it. Barclay Goodrow, Jimmy Vesey, and Tyler Mott. Beautiful. Chef's kiss. That is the fourth line that the Rangers needed in the playoffs. A little bit of grit with Barclay Goodrow. Is he overpaid? Sure. But Jimmy Vesey has been one of the best defensive forwards in the league, best defensive forward on the Rangers by far this year. And Tyler Mott, you just spoke about him. I mean, we can praise him for days.
Yeah, and Tyler Mott is also something that the Rangers needed on the fourth line, a good skater.
Yes, that's right.
which they've been lacking that for a seemingly very long time. Obviously, we had him after the trade deadline last season, but before that, it
Right.
clearly evident that we needed that. And now we just praised the third and fourth lines, and rightfully so. The top six: Tarasenko's playing well, Mika's playing well. Trocheck has his good games, his very good games, and then there's other ones where he looks early in the season. Trocheck, Kreider's been useless, and yeah, Kane's obviously dealing with something with the hip, and Panarin, you don't know what you're going to get until the game starts every night. So they got to find a little bit more consistency.
Yeah, I think consistency is the word. It's the right word to use when talking about those players. I think Tarasenko's been great. I think Zibanejad's been great. I think Panarin, again, has his off nights. Again, there's, times where you're scratching your head when it comes to Panarin. The second line, I think Trocheck's actually been pretty good in this stretch run. I like the way he's played. Again, you can make the argument whether he's a 2C or not, or whether he's overpaid, or whether he's signed for too many years. But I think for right now, for this team, I think Trocheck's been pretty decent and has been better than he was early on in the year and has gotten himself acclimated. Again, I just spoke about Kane. But yeah, again, I think the top six, they need to improve a little bit. No doubt about it. I mean, they're getting outshined right now by the third and fourth lines. But again, I think there'll be time to figure that out in the playoffs. And you know what? The ability to roll all four lines legitimately is a feeling that I haven't had with a Rangers team since 2014 or 2015. I didn't have that feeling with the Rangers last year. I have that feeling with the Rangers this year. And no matter what the matchup is this year, I think that the Rangers will be all right, for a variety of different reasons. I think their fourth line can go up toe to toe with any fourth line in this post of any team in this postseason. The third line, same thing. We have the best third line of any team in the NHL right now. Sorry. I mean, does anybody want to argue? I mean, in the second line, again, you have Trocheck and Zibanejad, two elite centers, at the number one and number two punch. And again, Artemi Panarin, again, he has his off nights, but Artemi Panarin is Artemi Panarin. Patrick Kane is Patrick Kane. And Vladimir Tarasenko is Vladimir Tarasenko. Their names and their histories speak for themselves.
Yes, they do. Now, we've already touched on the defense before we got to the forward group, and basically all rides and dies with Ryan Lindgren, apparently. But the guy's a warrior, and we need him. And Shesterkin, let's talk about him for a quick second. He's definitely having a bounce back stretch compared to earlier in the season.
I said it all along. I said that everybody talking about how tough the season Shesterkin has had was overblown from the beginning. And Igor has shown just how important he is to this team. And again, he's been fantastic. And we need Igor at the top of his game at this point in the season. And he is. I mean, he's better. He's looked better in these last few games, arguably, than he's looked at any point in this regular season prior. So, you want your best run if you're going to have, a little bit of lulls during the season to come at the end. And that's exactly what we've gotten with Igor. And again, even if he falters, again, I don't think any Ranger fan wants to envision Yaroslav Halak in the playoffs. Even if Igor struggles and it comes to that, Halak's been great. So, again, it's not going to come to that. But I'm just saying the fact that we've got such a good tandem that have played so well together is really making the future bright. But Igor's been great, so credit to him, tip of the cap.
And as we saw last season, which could very well be the theme this season, depending on how the team looks in the first round, this team rides or dies with how Igor is playing.
Yeah, team rides or dies with Igor. And again, the defense, you can't expect it to be impeccable, and it's not. And they're going to have their walls in the playoffs. But can Igor step up and be the Shesterkin that he's been in the last few weeks? I think this stretch should show you that he can. So
I agree. So with all that being said, we are 2 days. Well, actually, yeah, we're 2 days away from the end of the regular season, and the playoffs begin on Monday. So, Liam, I don't know what you're going to do over the weekend, but outside of working, I plan on mentally preparing for these games.
Over the years, I've learned that there's no way to adequately mentally prepare. I think that, the toll that's going to take on my heart and my brain, especially facing off against the New Jersey Devils. Again, the Rangers haven't really had to face off against a clear-cut division rival like the Devils or the Islanders in the playoffs since how long has it been? Since 2011, the Devils knocked us out in the conference finals. So,
2012,
again,
2012.
2012. But again, every playoff series definitely puts a toll on my heart, but especially so against such a bitter rival like New Jersey. Because again, if I lose to Carolina, yeah, it would hurt. I could stomach it. If we lose to the Devils in a year where we have to win the Stanley Cup, I don't know if I could stomach that one. It's going to be tough. But again, may the best team win.
Yeah, made the best team win. And look, if they beat us clean and they just outplay us and everything, it'll be a little bit easier to swallow knowing that we were just flat out outplayed. But if they get dirty, oh, there's going to be some yelling at the TV, all right?
They're going to get dirty, and that they're going to get behind their raucous crowd. But again, former Ranger on the Devils, Brendan Smith. Don't know if he's going to get any playing time with Luke Hughes now on the team, but
Hmm.
again, nice to think about those little rivalries. And again, it's going to be a fun series. I can't wait, whether it's New Jersey or Carolina. But I don't know which team I want to face more. I really don't. Tough
Oh, I
question.
want to face Carolina more because I know we'll stand a better chance of beating them with Svechnikov out. And Aho, if I remember correctly, he's still out, but should be ready to go for the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Brenda Moore's just got such a stingy system, and I know you feel this way. Rangers squeaked out of that series against Carolina.
Oh,
You
they
know,
did, and that's not a stretch to say they did. You could just tell by the
yeah.
way the series played out.
And I'm just worried about Carolina's speed, and again, I'm worried about New Jersey's speed. Against the veterans the Rangers have. Like if Patrick Kane gets caught in the D zone, we're toast. Like coming back the other way, Jack Hughes and Timo Meyer and Jesper Bratt, good luck, Igor. So again, like that kind of scares me. But again, I think it's going to be a fun series. I just want to see good hockey, and I don't want to see us get genuinely outplayed, like you said. Because the last time the Rangers got genuinely outplayed in the playoff series was 2016, and I have never broken more things in a house of mine since the Rangers Penguins and the Rangers lost in 5 in 2016. We got so outplayed in that series. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Anger like I've never felt.
Was that the day that you walked 7 miles, or was that the one against Ottawa?
No, 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 no. That was the day I walked 7 miles. Yep.
Yeah,
The one
so
against
just
Ottawa, I was in college. That was tough, but was what it was.
just for reference, Liam got so mad after game 5 against Pittsburgh in 2016 that he
After the second
literally,
period,
after the second period, he stormed out of his house and walked 7 miles just to cool off.
yes. And then my dad picked me up in the middle of nowhere, and he said, "Don't worry, buddy. It's all right. We got baseball coming up." And I was like, "Great!" And I'm a Mets fan. And that was before the 2015 Mets season. What did the Mets do that year? Went to the World Series and lost in 5 games to the Kansas City Royals. So brutal last couple of years, but you know what, Shades? It will all be all right if our beloved New York Rangers get the job done this year.
Yeah, yeah. And I will say this, as I've said before in the past, anything less than a conference final appearance is a complete and total failure. If they get knocked out first round, I'm going to need a hug from so many people. And yeah, if this team on paper can't do any damage, we are going to need to reassess this team come the offseason. But let's hope it doesn't get to that point.
Absolutely. The expectations are high and rightfully so. I can't wait to see what they come out with. A
Yeah,
couple
and
weeks.
the only thing we know so far about the first round playoff series is we will not have home ice no matter what. That's the only thing we know. It could be Jersey, could be Carolina. Hoping it's Carolina, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, that's all I got. You got anything else?
I got nothing else.
All
Excited
right.
for playoff predictions.
Yes. Yes. And like we said, that will be in just a couple days when we will actually know more than one matchup. So
Right. It's crazy. It's crazy with most teams having only one more game to go that we only know one matchup. It's
yeah.
pretty wild.
As much as I hate this, once every couple of years, it's actually wonderful because you just love the suspense.
Yeah. There's a lot of suspense. And again, whether it's the Islanders or Pittsburgh missing the playoffs, it's going to be a story,
Oh yeah.
like, so it's going to be fun. Real quick question for you before we end the
Oh,
show.
hit me.
Pick your brain real quick. Who has a better chance against the Boston Bruins, the New York Islanders or the Pittsburgh Penguins?
Does that answer your question?
No, it doesn't.
Oh
I
my
genuinely
goodness.
want to know. I would
Well,
say the Islanders because of Ilya, but again, Sidney Crosby is Sidney Crosby. Gino is Gino.
I'm gonna say the Penguins be on the sole basis that Barzell is out for the Islanders.
Okay, fair.
And
Definitely.
outside of 2015, Pittsburgh has not been an easy out.
Yeah, they had a couple series there against the Islanders, but yeah, again, yeah, they made them tough series. And of
Yes.
course, the Rangers last year was tough all the way through. So
On the last time they were an easy out was 2015. Thank you, 2015 Rangers. That was wonderful to witness.
2015 Rangers were such a good team.
They were, they were, but now we can just bask in the good old days, the good times that were
Absolutely.
unfortunately not championships, but were close.
They were close.
They were close. And that has been episode 40 of Pucks and Brews. Like, share, subscribe, whatever platform you're either watching, aka YouTube, or listening on, whichever one it may be. Follow us on all of our socials listed in the description box below. I have been your host, Michael Shades Faracino, alongside Liam, the Shellmaster Godimer, and we'll be back in a few days for episode 41, the playoff predictions. Things are about to get very interesting over the next 6:12 right now, the next 30 hours.
We'll see.
It's
Can't
going to
wait.
get very interesting. Everybody, have a good one.